Right, hi everybody, and welcome to another Wunderkammer podcast. I'm over all the way over in the USA with Nick Phillips, his Cryptic Curiosities. Um, Now we're going to be talking Bezos. This is a bit of a strange one. I think some people would have heard of them, some people wouldn't. Also, he's going to talk about some of the other stuff. He doesn't just do Bezos; he does everything. A real curiosity cabinet of just wonder. So please just enjoy this and listen. Nick's going to try and explain as well everything and just talk to you about some of these wonderful items. So, Nick, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ed. I really appreciate it. You're always fun to talk with and share stories with. So
Thanks, mate. That's really appreciated. So, right, Bezos. Let's just get straight to it. I mean, people might have heard of these in Harry Potter. I suppose they were in Harry Potter, weren't they? And they're basically like a medieval thing originally, weren't they?
yeah, basically, I don't know. They were made popular. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Harry Potter.
Yeah,
You know, a lot of people love Harry Potter. Everybody think there's actually a scene in Harry Potter where one of the characters is has drank poison, and then all of a sudden they're trying to figure out how to save him, and Harry thinks Bezor.
yeah.
And basically, a Bezor is a undigestible pieces of whatever material, whether it be grass, whether it be fibrous stuff, things like if something eats plastic, whatever. And what it does, it gets in their intestinal tract and stomach, and it won't digest. So it just kind of stays in there and rolls around until it becomes this ball of undigestible material. And so in those movies, when you see Harry, I've got one. If imagine a ball or an odd shape about the size of a small rock or a pea. That's kind of what you would
Hmm.
see in that movie. But this is just a little piece of undigestible material that Harry put in his friend's mouth to save him from being poisoned. And I know we think that's odd today, but in medieval times, it was, and even back further than that in the Asian continents and in Persia, the word bezor in the original Persian language means anti poison or antidote.
Hmm.
And so there was this belief that these stones could actually cure you if you drank poison or you ate something poisonous. And so what would happen is these kings would wear these necklaces and queens wear these necklaces. They were almost like, imagine like a round filigree silver case that they would wear around their neck that had holes in it. And they would keep these bezors in those holes. And that way, before they drank wine or anything like that, they could dip that bezor in the wine to make sure that someone hadn't poisoned it.
Yes, it's
So, and they would die. And it was just kind of superstition, and like I said, it went back way in the Asian countries and Persian countries. You know, all the way back then, they honestly believed that it would cure anything that when it comes to poison. So, and a funny story, and if I talk too much, please stop me. But a funny story is there was a king, there was a man who was on trial. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but he came in front of the king, and the king had always wanted to know if these bezors worked. So he told the guy, he said, "I tell you what," he said, "we're going to poison this goblet of wine, and I'm going to dip my bezor in it, and you drink it. And if it truly takes out the poison and you live, I'll let you go free. But if you drink it and you die, then that's your sentence." So he dipped it in the wine, and the man drank it, and of course he died from poisoning. So, but I've always thought that was an interesting story.
it's incredible some of these superstitions, and there's obviously something in it because these are still highly collectible in the Asian countries as well, aren't they? In ancient medicine,
Absolutely.
like
Yeah,
the value of a bezoar is probably as much as gold, something like that as well. Would you say, sort of weight for weight?
it is.
Yeah, they're incredibly
Yeah.
valuable, incredibly quite hard to find. I know quite a few metal detectors that seem to find them. And I don't know whether that's,
Really?
yeah, it's weird because obviously they're not metal, but they're looking on the ground, and obviously they're in fields. And in the UK, there's most fields have had animals in them, over time. And I don't know whether it's the carcass that has gone and left the bees, or it's funny. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is why. Or if something crazy happened and they were able to, it came back up
Mm,
with if it was cattle or something, it
yeah,
kind of regurgitated back up and somehow came out its mouth. I don't know if that's possible or
yeah,
not, but I've
yeah.
never heard of that. But that could be a reason as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, and so you get all different kinds of beetles as well, don't you? Because there's white ones, dark
You
ones.
do. They come. Yeah, they come in all different sizes. There's some that almost look like jacks. I don't know if you were as a kid. This is kind of old school, so a lot of younger people might not understand this. But I remember being young, you could buy jacks, and it had a bouncy ball, and you would drop the ball, and then you'd have to go down when the ball was in the air, and you grab as many jacks as you can and catch the ball in your hand.
Right.
And whoever grabbed the most jacks won.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's basically they look like jacks. They've got the little spikes on the ends.
yeah.
I don't have any of those to show you or to talk about, but I
Right,
do have. There's different ones like the one like you saw in the movie Harry Potter. That was a small bezoar that came from like a llama or
right.
something of that size.
Mm.
Most of the bezoars from those animals are very small, but then you have ones like these that I have in my hand. Think of
Blimey.
about, for me in the U.S., it's about the size of what you would call a softball. And I
Yeah,
don't know what,
tennis ball, bigger than a tennis ball, just
yeah,
slightly bigger than a
bigger than a
tennis
tennis
ball.
ball.
Yeah, but
Yes.
it's
And this
just
is
a
called a
ball.
tri.
It's just a ball of
Well,
hair, really, isn't it? It looks like a
yeah.
ball of hair. Yeah.
Yeah, basically it's the ball, and as you can see, and I'm showing you. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but there are all these little hairs. It almost looks like an animal that if it was just a ball, because the hair is that
Mm.
coarse, and this one more than likely was not in the stomach of this is probably bovine. This is probably I'm guessing a cow, because of the size of it. But this wasn't in the stomach super long. It was long enough to get big, but this layer itself hadn't been turned around. Think of a rock tumbler almost. I don't know if any of you, if you
Mm.
had one of those
Yeah,
as a kid, but the way that these rocks just tumble and tumble and tumble, and they wound up becoming
yeah.
smooth the longer that they tumble. Well, evidently, as this one built, this layer hadn't been tumbled very much because you can still see the hair. And that's
Right,
called a trichobezoar,
right.
because we
Okay.
know that the majority of this bezoar is hair based. And so your trichor bezoars are mostly hair based.
Are
And
they a
then I
bit more?
have another one here.
Are they a
Go
bit more
ahead.
collectible? Are they a bit more collectible than ones, Nick? Because they look so.
It just depends. I like the smooth ones. I've always liked the ones that have been polished almost. And this is I have another one here, and this one's even bigger than that. Imagine this one's about the size of probably three tennis balls or
Wow.
so. And this was actually housed on the it says courtesy of Department of Agriculture 1957. But this was actually on display in the US in a dime museum called the Gettysburg Dime Museum. And this one is polished. This one almost looks like a stone that has been polished so much, and it's got like a little sheen to it. And they come in different colors depending on what was eaten. This is almost a light tan or brown color, as opposed to the one that I just show. It had gray hairs and dark brown.
That's got to be the biggest beetle out there, hasn't it? That is huge.
Oh no, no, no. That's they're ones that are way bigger. There's ones that are the size of basketballs.
What?
They get
That is
yes.
incredible.
And that one's not passing. That was probably found in a cow that had died. I'm sure it had problems because of it. And whenever it was processed, they found that bezoar inside of it. I'm sure. And it actually occurs in humans as well. In the U.S. in Philadelphia, we have a place called the Museum of Physicians in Philadelphia, also known as the Mutter Museum. I don't know if you've ever heard of it,
Right.
but they
Okay.
actually have huh?
Yeah. No, I haven't
What?
heard of it, but please, yeah, go for it, Nick.
Yeah, and they actually have a human bezoar there that actually has the flow. Imagine almost like a wave of the intestines is what it looks like, and it's fully hair. This person evidently ate their own hair,
Right.
and in the process of doing that, it never would digest, so it just kind of expanded in the person's intestines and kind of made the shape that wave shape of the intestines.
Man, that's insane. That is. I'm going to see if I can try and get a picture of that one and maybe put it up on the podcast because that just sounds insane. Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
I didn't actually know that it was humans as well. I just thought it was sort of cows, llamas, that sort of thing. They're the ones that are sort of horses as well. I know that you used to get them from horses
yes,
because there was one locally that sold near me, and it was in a case. They'd obviously kept it, and then that was a horse one, but that was white. Actually, that one was. So it's obviously like you
most of the
say,
horse.
what?
I don't know why most of the horse ones I've seen are white, and I don't know. I'll have to study that. I've never researched that, but that's actually all the ones I've seen are white, and they seem more calcium based is the only thing that I can think of,
Yeah, that's
and
what I
and
thought.
more stone like. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, calcium
yeah,
based. They've gone more calcified, haven't they? Like that.
yes.
Yeah, Nick. Well, Beezors, they're incredible. For people that don't know, I mean, where do you go if you want to try and find a Beezor? What?
See, that's the hard thing. So you know as well as I do when you become a collector of something, you're known for it. It
Yeah.
kind of starts finding you. So I'm to the point now where I have collectors message me and say, "Hey, I'm in an antique shop and they have these Bezors. Do you want me to get them for you?" And I'm always like,
Cool.
"Absolutely." But to start out, it would be a good idea. You could talk to some of your vets in your area, especially
Ah.
ones that deal with and equestrian horses, ones that deal with cattle. That's processing places. That might not be a bad idea. Now, when you get into the old pieces, they start getting very expensive. I have a
Mm.
piece from one of the oldest apothecaries in the world that wound up a museum. It wound up closing down, and they sold. It was a museum, and they sold the collection through auction. And I was fortunate enough to. I didn't. I wasn't able to get one from the auction, but a friend of mine who's a collector did, and he was gracious enough to sell it to me. And so
Wow.
I actually have one. You can't see it, of course, with the podcast, but here's
Wow.
what this one looks like. This is beautiful on a base with filigree metal holding it to the base, and then it also has a wax seal from the
Wow.
apothecary.
Wow, that's an
So
incredible piece. That
you,
is, and the smaller ones would have been in these intro that used to have. I think I've seen one at auction once, a very old one that was in a necklace, and it would
yeah,
have been like in a gold case sort of type thing, which is just,
yes,
yeah, they would have been important, and they would be mostly for sort of royalty and people of high
yeah,
stature, wouldn't they? Would have these, so they'd usually be embellished
yes.
with gold and stuff. Yeah, no, they're absolutely incredible, and it's an incredible thing, incredible, different, and unusual item. Which, Nick, you've got plenty of, haven't you? Because Bezos are not just
I
the thing that
do.
you do. Yeah, because another one that really,
I'm a.
yeah,
You know what? It reminds me of a joke. It says, "You know what the difference between a collector and a hoarder is? Shelves. That's the." And I collect so many different things, but I've just come to the conclusion that there's so many interesting things in life, and it helps me learn. I'll find
Mm,
something, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I start reading every article I can get a hold of, and I start reading the history of the piece, and so that's kind of what got me into, I believe, what we're going to talk about next.
Yes.
I saw a piece on I believe it was Instagram or something. It was not for sale. It was from a little museum, and that's kind of you. I'll let you introduce what we're going to talk about next. But that's kind of what got me as we flow into this.
Yeah,
You know.
well, I mean, spoke to you before the podcast, and I said, I mean, what do you want to cover? And I said, we've got to cover Bezos, and then I noticed that you'd been getting quite a lot of these Iron Maidens, and I just thought that was really
Yes.
interesting, because I don't actually know a lot about these. So if you could just educate me, Nick, please, as well, and everybody out there.
Well, an Iron Maiden is one of the most iconic torture devices that's out there. And I have a picture. I have a piece right here. One, and I collect miniatures, and basically imagine a woman made out of iron, and it's large enough. The real ones, they were big enough to put a person inside. But imagine if it was almost like a woman in a dress, and as you
Mm-hmm.
open it up, the dress has doors, and the woman opens up, and as she does, inside the doors and inside the back are spikes.
Right.
And
God.
so the legend is they would put people inside these, and they would close the doors, and the spikes would close in on them,
What?
and it was so tight that the people couldn't sit, they couldn't do anything, they had to stand up, and these spikes just pressed against them, and eventually I guess they would bleed to death, and they would die from exhaustion and blood loss.
Whoa.
But so the thing about Iron Maidens, and this is the reason why I collect them, is it being one of the most iconic torture devices. There's never any type of indication that these were actually a real torture device. There are no
Okay.
books that talk about them being used in torture. They believe that it was almost like a scare tactic or just a dream piece a fantasy piece that was made up. Now they are old. Most of my collection of miniatures are from the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. But they believe it was almost amalgamation of several different torture devices put together to make this fantasy piece. But yet it's become the most iconic torture device out there that never existed in reality,
Do
other
you
than
think
just
do
something put together.
do you think that there was one out there somewhere, and these are like souvenir pieces for people went to see it, and then they could get a miniature Iron
Yes, that's
Maiden?
that's exactly what the Yes, these are actually most of these that I have, these little Iron Maidens. I have everything from spoons. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I'd collect spoons, I would have told you that you were crazy. But I have about 12 to 15 Iron Maiden spoons where the end of them have an Iron Maiden that actually open up with the little spikes. They're tiny, and
Right.
you're not gonna be able to see it unless you watch the video here. But they're tiny with these little bitty spikes, and this one actually says Nuremberg, June 9th, 1894. And the reason it says Nuremberg is because there was the most famous Iron Maiden was housed in one of Nuremberg castles. Nuremberg Castle is actually made up of several buildings in Nuremberg, Germany, and they had a torture museum. These were all medieval castles, and they had a torture museum that was a tourist attraction. And in the 1940s, during World War II, it was actually bombed, and the Iron Maiden was destroyed. And you can still find little vials, and I haven't been able to attain one, that I really like yet. But they have little vials that'll have pieces of the Iron Maiden in them. But people would tour, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Grand Tour.
Yes. Yes.
The wealthy, yes, the
Yeah.
wealthy during that time would travel around, before they would go to college or go to higher education, or this was served as higher education for a lot. They would travel the world, especially Europe and different places, and they would pick up souvenirs for what they call this grand tour. It was their way of learning about life and learning about history, and I believe that a lot of these Iron Maiden souvenirs came from that era, and especially from the Nuremberg museum that they were sold to them. I have examples. I have probably close to 10 different examples of the miniatures, just the regular miniatures. Some are on wood bases, some are on metal bases. This one actually is antique. It's either bone or ivory. It's
Wow.
old, very very old piece. It's from the 1800s, and so they just came in. I guess every so many years they would put out a different one, and they would also there was also a traveling exhibit that came through a World's Fair. I can't remember the year, but there was an
Right.
Iron Maiden at a World Fair, and some of these examples you actually could buy as a souvenir from that World's Fair, where the Iron Maiden and the Torture Museum was traveling as well.
That's
But I
that's
have
really
everything from
That's really
yeah,
interesting, Nick, because I would never have thought that an Iron Maiden would have been part of a grand tour, and there is a huge amount of grand tour collectors out there that probably don't
there
know
are
this as well. That probably
yeah.
don't realise that this would have been a part of the tour, and they're probably going to listen to this and think, I need to get myself an Iron Maiden now.
I might not should have said that. It might make it harder
No.
for me to find Iron Maidens.
That's what I was then thinking, Nick. All these grand tour collectors are going to be, I'm missing a trick here because I haven't got one of these in my collection. So,
But it really is amazing. Like when I started out collecting these. I started collecting one of the small figures, and imagine if this figure's most are about 3 inches tall, and they do have one that I haven't had a chance to get a hold of yet. That's about 10 inches tall, and it's out of bronze, and it opens up and actually has a woman inside. It's a beautiful piece. It's just eluded me so far, but I'll wind up getting one. But they have everything from I have hat pins, little hat pins that open up. This little hat pin's all of 2.5 inches tall. Imagine a pin with a little Iron Maiden on the top that opens up. I have charms that are about 3/4 of an inch. Excuse me for using U.S. measurements here, but
no, go
but
for
about
it.
three
No,
quarters of an inch tall. And I have there are jewelry boxes that have the image of the Iron Maiden on the side that you can get in Nuremberg, postcards. It really, really is an amazing collection of things. And just when I think I've seen everything, another piece will pop up at auction, and it'll be something I've never seen before.
and that's it. The thing is, and once you sort of start in this collecting, Nick, it's probably very hard not to buy it. Even if the price is sort of ridiculously high, you've really got to try and add it to your collection, don't you?
Oh, especially, yeah, I'm to the point now where it's like if I see it, it's rare because, I've been searching for these for over 10 years. So if something pops up, I haven't seen it in at least 10 years. And so like I try to set, okay, this is all I'm going to spend, but when something amazing comes up, it just that goes out the water. But I'd like to show one more thing in my Iron Maiden collection, if you don't mind,
Oh
or
yes,
talk about it.
definitely.
This is a crossover piece for me. I don't know if you've ever had anyone on that collects spiritualist items or not.
Okay.
I know the spiritualist movement was huge here in the U.S. During the Victorian times and things, but this is a piece. It's a drawing, a graphite drawing of an Iron Maiden. And this is a fairly old piece, and this piece was actually drawn by a man by the name of J.V. Mansfield. And
Okay.
J.V. Mansfield is known as the postmaster spiritualist. He was a spiritualist that happened to be a postmaster for the U.S. Post Office, and people would send him items, and he would actually kind of read the items and send them a letter back as far as what he read from it and what it was and different things like that. And
Yeah.
several years ago, a collection of his pieces were sold and auctioned off, and I was able to pick up this that drawing from the J.V. Mansfield collection. So it's kind of a double collectible for me. Not only is it Iron Maiden related, but it's also spiritualist related, which I personally, that movement, it's interesting to read about. I don't follow that movement, and I do
Mm.
collect pieces in that realm, but most of mine have to do with magic, magicians that are debunking spiritualists. So it kind of fits over in my collection. It kind of crosses over to that side of my collection as
Well,
well. I
that was
thought that
that
would
was
that would be kind of neat to share.
that was massive in the UK and Europe as well. I mean, it was a lot of seances and this sort of thing in
Yeah.
Victorian times. I mean, where I'm sitting now, um, I live next door to the house where the famous architect, not architect, he was Basil Brown, yeah. So he's an archaeologist that found the Sutton Hoo treasure, and the Sutton Hoo
Oh
treasure is one of
wow.
the biggest finds in the UK. It was an Anglo-Saxon hoard, a king. It's meant to be Railward or someone like that, and he had his shed where I'm sitting basically. But to get onto the seance thing, they had a seance in the house before, and a horseman came to him basically and said, "Go and dig this, you know, place here." And then he went out and dug it, and he found this. So it's such a massive um, movement here, yeah, for sure, especially in that sort of Victorian time. And then
Yeah.
later into like the 20s, even up into the 30s, and then it sort of dwindled out, I suppose, with the war. But before that, people were having seances. It was like you coming over Saturday night and we'll have a seance type thing.
It was pretty important when they would have their own parlors just for that.
Yeah, 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 that's right. So, Nick, talking about other items, you we sort of touched on this a little bit. You've been out and about, and you've been somewhere just recently, and you spoke to me pre podcast about this, and I just thought this was really interesting, and about the guy that the clergyman that done the snakes. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Uh, as if I don't collect enough realms, one of the collections that I love that I'm working on is I'm from the southeast United States. Around where the Appalachian mountains are, with a lot of what I call backwoods kind of macabre history. Everything from you've got folk magic to one of the things that I collect is I was blessed a couple of years ago to go with a group from northeast United States called the group is called Haint Blue, and which is I can explain some other time. But Haint Blue is a tradition in the South as well. But these guys, they just traveling and visit some amazing places, and they were coming down to my neck of the woods here in the South, and they contacted me, and I grew up in a Christian home and things like that. So most of them are they're atheists and don't necessarily believe in God. And they made a joke. They asked me if I would go with them because they said they wanted me to be a buffer between them and God, and they wanted me to visit a snake handling church in the
Right.
backwoods of Tennessee. And so I went with them. And if you don't know what a snake handling church is, basically they believe in the scripture that says that they shall take up serpents and they will not be harmed, and they shall drink deadly poison and it will not harm them. And so basically, these pastors believe that if the Spirit leads them, that they can take up serpents during services. And these are venomous serpents. They have their fangs. They're not, defanged or anything. And we were blessed enough to be able to go to a service to where this was happening with Pastor Jimmy Morrow, him and his wife Pam, and he's also a folk artist in the backwoods of Tennessee, and he most of his subject matter has to do with Appalachian folklore and snake handling.
Mm.
And so we were able to go to and you walk into this church, and everywhere around are these apocalyptic scenes that have been painted by Jimmy that are just amazing. Everything from plagues with frogs to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, everything. These paintings were just absolutely great. And Jimmy was such a kind man, such a nice man. And while I was there, we were able to pick up several pieces of art, and he carves these canes with snakes in them. He weaves baskets out of kudzu, which is a plant that we have here that grows and you can't kill it. It just grows for miles and miles and miles. And it was so interesting to see these people that were so passionate about their beliefs that they would handle these copperheads and rattlesnakes and these venomous snakes, and while they were praying and preaching, they would actually have these snakes in their hands, and they never got bit, never got touched, and just did their
That's
thing. So
That's just incredible, isn't it? It's just, it must have been such
it
an
is.
experience to see that, and then also to acquire for your collection some of those pieces as well. Because I've managed to get a glimpse of some of them pieces on Instagram from different accounts that both yourself and I know, and they're so cool. They're so folky. They're so unusual. I mean, you're never going to see anything like it, are you? Really, which is really cool.
Mm. No, you aren't. And it came about in I believe it was 1909, either 1909 or 1919. So, as far as history goes, it's not a practice that's been around that long.
Right. Okay.
Of course, U.S. history is a lot. We don't have the deep history that you have
No.
over in the UK, and so, but still, 100 years or so still is not a long time for
No.
this to be practiced, and we're seeing it dying out. I remember being a kid in the South, sitting on a porch. With my grandfather and uncles, and them talking about old snake handling churches, or going to a revival where they broke out a snake, and so it was real interesting to me to be able to see some of the Southern history that's been
Mm,
lost around here. And the great thing about living in the South is the oral tradition, but it's also a bad thing because it's an oral tradition, a lot gets lost.
mm,
And so I'm thankful for people like you who do these podcasts and these things that used to be so big that there's a chance they could get lost. You're helping keep that history alive, and being from where I'm from, that was part of my reason for wanting to go, is because I wanted to see something that my uncles saw and my grandfather saw, but and most people my age will never get a chance to see, because eventually that's going to be lost, and it's going to be a practice, whether right or wrong, or whether, how you believe it,
mm.
it's going to be lost, never to be seen again, you
So
know.
was he the last one that does it then, Nick, or is there still other ones out there that you just don't know? Because obviously it's quite an underground thing, is it?
Yeah. It's very underground. That they supposedly there are churches all over the US and even in some other countries, but again, it's not going to be a large church. When we went, there were, I think, around 8 of us, but the congregation, there was only about, I'm guessing, at the most 20. It was a very small gathering.
Mm,
And from what I understand, since then, since Pastor Jimmy passed away, seeing that in that culture and that belief, the pastor's the one who takes care of the snakes. He believes that it's his calling to make sure they're taken care of, and that they're being fed, and that they're handled right, and everything like that. So with him passing, his were given away to another pastor, and as far as I know, they haven't handled snakes in that church since Pastor
mm,
Jimmy has passed. And so I don't know if they will. So there's a lot of churches. There's been some churches, one near me, where the pastor got arrested for murder because he used a snake to kill his wife, and they thought that he was trying to hide it, as far as a religious practice. And so, that different things have been dissolved there. So it's not something that you're, that's you're going to
mm.
see. They're out there, but you're not going to hear much about them.
No, no. Well, that's very strange because I hadn't I'd heard about I'd sort of seen about him only from Joe, your friend, basically, on his Instagram, where he sort of vaguely talked about them, and I was like, "What, a snake handling part? What is this all about?" So thanks for telling everybody about it as well, because I'm sure people just don't know that these sort of things go on. And it's really incredible, Nick. It really is. And I'd love to, if you would send me some pictures of the art that you've got, that would be amazing. So I could put that up on my Instagram just to show people, when these go out, because I'm sure people would be really interested to see some of his fake art as
Absolutely.
well. That would be absolutely amazing. So, Nick, if people want to go and
Yeah.
find you, you're not really too much on Instagram, too much. You're not massive on social media, are you? But you're Cryptic Curiosities, is that right?
That's it. On Instagram, I'm Cryptic Curiosities, and that's where I post. I post a lot of my collection. I don't post all my collection on there. I just enjoy collecting, and
Mm.
the only reason I really use social media is I get to meet people like you and other collectors. I use it more to be able to meet people who are into what I'm into, But I'm just one of those. I've collected ever since I was young, and I just collect to collect, and it's not to get any type of recognition or anything like that. I just love it. I love interesting things. But Cryptic Curiosities on
Mm.
Instagram, I would love for you to anyone out there that's listening to follow me. And please, if you do, I'm big on getting to know the people that follow me. And if you have any questions or you just want to say hello, please send me a message on there. I answer all my messages, and I would love to say hey. And again, if you have any questions or if you're a collector, I'd love to see some of your collections. I just love talking with people who are interested in the same things that I'm in.
Yeah,
So
and obviously you know a lot about certain items as well. So if you think you've got a bezel, you're not sure, yeah, just give Nick a
yeah,
message. He'll tell you whether it's a bezel or not, basically, or he'll give you some directions in that as well. And
absolutely.
obviously the Iron Maiden, stuff as well for sure. There, but
Yeah,
anything to do with curiosities, basically, Nick, you and the group that you're in, you know, they'll know it basically. So, Nick, I'd just like to
absolutely. And
thank.
if I can't help you, I can find someone that can.
Yeah, that's
Poor. I feel
right.
so bad. I've had to tell people before that what they had was a rock or a cannonball. It wasn't a bezoar, So, but absolutely, and I don't know about everything, but I've learned that a wise person surrounds themselves with people that are good at what they do, and that are good at what they're not good at. So,
Yeah.
if I'm not good in the area, I have people around me that are very good in that area. So,
Yeah, no, that's really cool, Nick, and that's great. You always a help to me if I've got something, because your knowledge is just brilliant. So thank you, Nick. Right, so Nick, what you got planned for the future? Anything cool coming up? You going anywhere special? Anything just out on the
as
hunt?
a not right. I just got back from another trip to visit after Jimmy Morrow passed. Me and some other friends, Joe, that
Mm,
we went to visit his wife just to give our condolences, and
yeah.
she wanted to know if there were any pieces we wanted to pick up before any museums. A lot of museums have bought pieces from her, and she wanted to make sure we got some.
Mm,
So we went there. That was my latest adventure, and I'm just waiting for the next one. Whatever comes up is where look forward
cool.
to going and learning something new. So
That's really cool. Well, Nick, thanks very much for joining me, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we'll do this again at some point, and I hope all of you listeners out there enjoyed Nick as much as what I did, because it's always a pleasure speaking to him. And thank you for joining me on the podcast, Nick.
no, I thank you for inviting me, and I would love to do it again. Just let me know when.
Right, cheers, Nick. I'll speak to you soon.
Hey,
Thanks, mate. Bye.
have a good day, Ed. Thank you.